When you're a consumer tech company and you want to get your brand out there, I think the most important thing is getting your story right. What is the story you want to say? Focus on the why your product exists out there on the market, what problems it solves. Talking about, the day to day of people, of you, you have your, the customers that are going to buy your product are people just like us, right? What does it solve for you? How does it make your life easier? Those are the stories that I think, first of all, stick to people, that they remember, and that make a difference. And then when people, share your story, it's much more easier to relate. Anytime before you start launching a campaign, I think the most important thing to do is first manage everybody's expectations, set the goals of the campaigns. What do we expect that is going to happen? What do we want to accomplish? And have everybody on the same page. If it's the founders, the CEOs, the PR agency, and to get everybody aligned, so that after the campaign, when you assess, the efficacy of it, um, no, there will be no surprises. It could be, what outlets we're going to be in, how much reach it's going to get. And I think that really helps, that when you come and try to measure the effectiveness of the campaign, looking back and seeing, okay, did we have our expectations right? And once you have that expectation, and also, the PR agency as being the subject matter experts on media and reporters, and understand who's who and what's going on, and what's the possibility of getting this story across. It's really, really important to understand what it actually can do in this, specific time, and to have everybody on board with that approach. You always, try to tell the emotional, the human story that touches the person, that he remembers you. But then, sometimes what will help your company most is telling what makes you different. What is the IP that, you have worked and developed for, for the past X years, and why your solution is unique. But when you're talking to mass media market, for example, right? For consumer lifestyle, they want to know how we affect, people's lives at home, how it changes, and I think once you tell that story that way, then people remember, and people start, sharing your story and telling your story to other people. And that's what really, really makes a difference. And I think, again, you need to remember who the audience is that you're talking to, and what impact you want them to have the story on them, right? Do you want them to remember their story? Do you want them to have some sort of, business goal, right? So is this some sort of partnership that you want to start with this corporation, or an investor that you want them to invest? So if this investor is one that invests in deep tech, then you'll tell a deep tech story. If this is a consumer lifestyle reporter, then you'll talk about the more emotional side, the human, how we touch people and how we save lives. When you decide between B2C and B2B2C, I always like to say, you need to experiment, you need to try, right? And really also depends on your budget. You need to try to do everything, one, in order to get your brand out there, to get your, product, value, right? What is the value that you're going to sell? And then you need to see what works and what doesn't work. And based on that, start iterating and, changing your strategy accordingly. When we launched Elikue commercially last year, we had to decide, right? Where are we going? Are we gonna launch this to consumers everywhere? Are we gonna talk to, healthcare agencies and non-for-profits selling services to older adults? But we knew that, first of all, because Elikue is a unique product, it's not something that, people go online and they don't search for a robot for older adults. We knew that we had to get the reception of consumers, of people understanding that, first of all, yes, there is a voice assistant that looks different, that has a moving body, that looks like a robot, that is proactive, starts talking to you, and is also meant to answer the problem of loneliness amongst older adults, something that, there is no product before that that answered this benefit. So we knew we had to also gain awareness, nationally, and amongst consumers and users, for them to even, be receptive to this idea. Um, with that, when we launched, we did a lot of, awareness campaigns, and acquisition campaigns in specific areas. We had B2Bs come to us and say, we want to purchase this for our members. To do B2C marketing, you need a lot of money to gain the media awareness, to be on shelves, to be top of mind for consumers. And once we saw that selling through B2B2C was cheaper and easier, maybe a little bit slower, but was much cheaper. Also, when you sell B2C, you get one customer, Here, all of a sudden, with our New York contract, we got 890 customers at once. We have a lot of customers that we use as our evangelists. We usually look at like our top performers, people that are really engaged with the product. And then we start creating a relationship with them when we ask them do you want to tell your story to other people? Do you want to help us get more devices and to other, older adults that can benefit from them? And then based on, their answer, then we decide, okay, this is a user that we call them a marketing user, that we see them as an extension of the marketing team. There are people that our PR firm can talk to, that our investors can talk to. We have a pool of people that are ready, to talk to interviews, to tell their story and to, share the impact that the product has had in their life. And we treat them like a team. And we update them also on what's going on in the company, what we're developing, what we're working on, if they have feedback for us. And we really make them feel like they work for us. One of the most successful campaigns that we did together was announcing our first B2B customer, which is the New York State. This campaign was a little bit different because on one hand, we just launched commercially and we were announcing our first, B2B customer. And it was an interesting story also nationally, where we were talking about this is the first state that is buying robots for, vulnerable citizens that they are serving. And that was like, if we look on the goals for the national campaign, it was more about the brand awareness, telling the story of Elie-Q as a brand. And then on the local campaign, we were very successful in each and every county, where we also, in some of the campaigns brought users that are in those counties where we're telling their story. And it helped us not only as an awareness, okay, now people's in these counties can get Elie-Q is here, but also on, the customer acquisition. So people heard about it in the local news. They, told their case manager that they're interested in Elie-Qs, and that's how we got the word out. And I think the fact that this was such a successful local campaign helped us get more Elie-Qs distributed. Over the years, we deliberated a lot, right, of coming to every stage possible, going everywhere and saying, Elie-Q can solve loneliness for older adults. And we did that in the beginning, and we were just telling the story and we were showing prototypes, and Elie-Q wasn't working yet. Sorry. Elie-Q wasn't working yet, and we always had this, we had to walk a very, fine line between how big of the story that we're telling and what is actually there in terms of reality. Because then when reporters, when customers, when investors come to you and you have nothing to show to back it up, that's not the position that we wanted to be in. So we always had to weigh, right, what's the narrative that we're saying, and what do we have? What do we have in our hands, right? So when we just had the story, we were talking about, the thought leadership of loneliness and AI and how we can help older adults be healthier in their homes and how it can, impact them and their family members. And we're talking about the bigger picture, of older adults in America and what their problems are, and how technology can help and how, technology should help. And then when we, matured the company more and we started to have customers, we started talking about data, and we started, talking about how Elie-Q has been tested with lots of older adults and what we're seeing in the field. And we had to show that we had a product that works and that is being tested. And then when we matured even more and we're, commercially available, the story that we were telling is not even our story. It's our customer's story and why they're bringing the product to their to their customers, and what is it that they're finding in our product a benefit. And I think that it's very, very important to be honest to yourself, to not only tell the story, but tell the story in a way that has some grasp on reality on what you have, um, so that it won't look that you're just, you have all these fantasies of what you're building. And it's great to sell a dream, but you also need to have a product that resembles that dream and that delivers on that dream.